views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. I'm Gary Axelbank, and if you're looking at me going, you know, the guy looks familiar, it's because, yes, I host Bronx Talk, and most people know me from that. But this is our new show on BronxNet Television, where we do reporters' roundtables and talk to Bronx reporters about things that are important to you and me, the things they're writing about, the things they're talking about, and try to get a little insight into all different issues. So on our Bronx Reporters Roundtable on the Bronx Buzz today, in the studio here with us is Steve Goodstein from the Bronx Times. Nice to have you, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And through the magic of some kind of technology on Skype is David Cruz from the Norwood News. Nice to have Dave all the way over there on the other side of the Bronx in Norwood. Nice to see you, Dave.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's always good to have you over there. And Dave, we're going to start with you. Before we get to anything of a Bronx nature, we have to congratulate you, ladies and gentlemen. David Cruz became a father. He just had a baby daughter. I should have had a cigar. All I have is this orange Sharpie. And I can't give it to you anyway. How's it going? You getting any sleep or what's going on?
What's sleep?
Well, that's a good answer. But are you happy? You and your wife happy?
Yeah. Definitely settling in right now. It's a different tone right now, and especially in this house. It's just a very more subdued atmosphere now since we've had our baby.
I remember for myself that, we had cats, and I think we always used to think the cats were our children. Then we had children, and all of a sudden the cats weren't even on the map. So
it's funny you say that. We actually have a cat too, and she's sort of like sleeping over there right now.
Oh yeah,
not paying attention too much.
He just dropped down a couple of rungs on the totem pole, I can tell you that. Anyway, Dave, let's get to some serious stuff, but we do want to congratulate you. It's a blessing. It's a beautiful thing, and certainly we wish you and your family all the best. And we also wish that you will keep doing great work at the Norwood News. Let's start with the front page. You actually have the paper with you. I don't have the Norwood News. So tell me about this landlord story that's on the front page of your paper about the worst landlord.
Well, this story is a follow-up story on Ben Parkash. He's considered the worst landlord in New York City. He has about 60 buildings in the Bronx. And this Bronx group had strong-armed him, convinced him to actually go ahead and meet the tenants that are living in some of the worst buildings in the city that are under his name. And he actually showed up. I think he's trying to sort of reshape his image a little bit, and was sitting there taking in concerns from essentially tenants who've been there for years. And they were giving them pretty horror stories. Mm-hmm. One person had a bunch of roaches coming out of their stove that he had presumably replaced, and it was just
you might have cut out there, but it was I'm sure horrible and disgusting, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable that people live in these kinds of conditions.
Really.
What I want to know from just a general perspective, so you say he's got more than a dozen buildings. All these buildings, or many of these buildings, are substandard. There are dozens, maybe into hundreds of violations in these buildings. How does a landlord get to keep that property for that long? Isn't there something that can be definitively done to get him the heck out of here? And I realize somebody owns property, but if you're frankly abusing tenants in that way, how is it that there is not enough legal authority and other authority to get them the heck out of here?
Well, a couple of things are actually happening with Ben Parkash. The city to actually take away some of the subsidies that go towards rent for some of the tenants. And he's also considered part of the Dirty Dozen across the city. And that involves penalizing by taking away the subsidies. The other thing that works for him is that housing court is sort of designed to work against the tenant.
That's a loaded statement, but go ahead.
I think it is because most of the time the tenants are there by themselves. They don't really have a lawyer. A lot of them are poor. They can't afford a lawyer. And landlords usually don't show up. They have a lawyer go and represent them in court. And they're more familiar with legal channels.
You know, this has been going on for generations, really, in the Bronx. And I remember, which goes back way, way back, when BronxNet had a news show. And on the news show, I did a news story, and we went through Housing Court. And that was when it was in the 161st Street courthouse, before they built the new courthouse. And, it really was just what you're saying. And when they built the new courthouse, the word was, now things will move through more quickly. Tenants will not get abused. In other words, being made to, come back to visit 5 different times to get a case solved. But it doesn't seem to be the case, does it?
No, and that's the problem with housing court in general. It gets delayed. People get tired of fighting it in court. And then from there, they just give up. They move out.
What's going to be the resolve here in the long run? You think he's going to lose his buildings? You think he's going to go to jail? Will the tenants get some relief?
I'm going to say yes, especially it's a good sign that he ended up showing up to this meeting. He didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to a criminal matter, it would never reach that point unless he knowingly neglected an issue that required immediate fixing.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I want to move to a different topic, which actually we talked with Councilman Cohn on Bronx Talk, the other program, and that is the idea that we can go through the history of this. Trees on Marshallou Parkway were recently, relatively recently planted, and now there was talk that maybe they would be removed. I know when they were planted, I was not happy. As an advocate for youth and recreation, I believe that we need as much play space as we can get. And if there is a problem with, as I discussed with Councilmember Cohn on the show, if there is a problem with balls or other activity, coming, interfering with the traffic, that maybe we can ameliorate that instead of putting trees on and then telling the kids or young adults or whoever it is that uses them for soccer or for football or for other lounging things, recreational activities, that they just have to go elsewhere. That's my thought.
Well, I can tell you that, as you know, some of the advocates for the parkway are sort of against that position, mainly because of the safety aspect to the parkway. It is heavily used, especially during the rush hour, and there are times when there are games, but sometimes a lot of kids are taking a risk.
Mm-hmm. What is slated to happen? Will those trees stay, or will the city remove them? Which, aside from what I think or what you think or what anybody thinks, if they do remove them, it would seem to be just a ridiculous waste of city resource and money and whatever else to have planted them and now take them out.
Well, right. I mean, that's what Elizabeth Coranta over at Friends of Marshall Parkland has been lobbying the Parks Department to keep those trees. They think that there was she suspects there was some kind of political motivation to actually have those trees removed, and she's looking to just keep them where they are. She's sort of a naturalist at this point.
Right. Well, I guess I'm fighting a losing battle. I think we need more play space, but that's just me. Dave, thanks. We want you to hang on because we're going to do our Buzz of the Week, and we'll have you join us for that. But I'm going to spend a little time with my friend Stephen Goodstein from the Bronx Times. How's things going? How are you?
Things are good, the Bronx is buzzing, as you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. I've been working on some really interesting stories. There's a nursing home that was recently sold. A lot of residents and
We'll talk about
neighbors
that.
are concerned about that, and some other stuff too.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but I do want to thank you for using the name of the show in the way that you described the Bronx. You said
Hey,
the
I'm
Bronx
here.
was
I
buzzing.
might
You
as
got
well.
that? There
Come on.
you go. All right, well, let's talk about that. You wrote about Beth Abraham was sold. There was a lot of concern. So let's talk in general about that, and then we can break down some of the specifics.
There was a lot of concern, but also a lot of chaos because nobody really knew what was going on.
Other than rumors, which is what I had heard.
Exactly. Well, this deal, came to us late March, early April. That Center Light Health System had sold the Beth Abraham facility on Allerton Avenue to Centers Healthcare, another provider who started in the Bronx. And the residents, neighbors really didn't know what was going on because neither Center Light Health System nor Centers Healthcare was being very responsive to the residents. That's what residents have told us.
Do you have a sense that some of the services, and these are long time services,
Absolutely.
We'll talk in a moment about one of the specific ones, but are those going to stay, or will there be a change in the way the place operates?
Well, there have already been staff cuts. There have been pay cuts. Pay, I think, has been reduced by 15%. Residents have, employees there, nurses, staff, have lost a week of vacation. They've lost sick days. So a lot's changing. Staff has been let go. Patients who have been used to the same care for years are now, wondering what's going on. Nurses are being switched around, and it's kind of confusing for them.
Do you have a sense that, we'd like to think that it's going to settle in at some point. We understand change can be difficult. Do you have a sense that, and did you hear from anybody from the new management that things are going to settle in, or is it still kind of hush-hush?
A little bit of both. The buyer has...
And the name
been
of the
in
company
contact.
again, if you would?
As if this isn't confusing, Center Light Health System was the seller, and Centers Healthcare purchased the facility. So,
Okay.
that was a puzzle to figure out in itself.
Yeah, that's if we had another show called The Bronx Buzzer.
Right, exactly. But it's still rather unclear as to what's going on. Patients have complained to us saying that they're
Really?
not used to getting the same care.
Wow.
Even employees have come forward, staff have come forward.
And I'm sure if you're talking about patients, and maybe in some cases seniors or people with disabilities, then you may also be talking about their families will get involved, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
The thing that concerns me, and unfortunately I don't have information, maybe we can come up with that information, Beth Abraham and the Center Light Health System was home to an historic music therapy program, which many people know Oliver Sacks and the movie Awakenings, and all those other things. They had beautiful music therapy rooms, which were really internationally known. And my last discussion with them was, we don't know what's going to happen to them. If we lose it, that would be just a tremendous loss for the Bronx and for anybody, because it was a very innovative program. But we don't know the status of that.
Yeah, we need to get more information on that. There has been word that the music therapy program is out. But this all seemed to stem from the Medicaid fraud that Beth Abraham went through Center Light.
Right. And then they had to pay a fine?
They had to pay $43 million, actually.
Oh, I thought it was 16, but you're saying it's $43
43.
million?
That's what I have. Yeah, and 43, maybe 47. I'm sorry.
All right.
For fraudulently billing.
So then all of a
Medicaid.
sudden they say, you know what, we got to get out of this business. You wrote another interesting story, which I just think is fascinating. As you drive across, let's say, the Willis Avenue Bridge, you could look to your left and see this for many, many years, History Channel billboard sign, and apparently that's changing now.
That's right. And actually, this was one of my favorite stories I've ever written. When I was in elementary school, I used to ride by there because I went
like
to
we
school
all
on the Upper
did,
East
of
Side.
course.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember it being there for at least 15 years. But now iHeartRadio, the radio station, will be taking over at that billboard space.
Well, do we know when that's going to happen?
The billboard will be completed August 1st, I believe.
Oh, so it's just right around the corner.
Yeah.
What is very interesting to me about that is not necessarily, well, the sign, yes, it was an historic sign, and we know all about all that kind of stuff, but it means that iHeartRadio is trying to make some inroads, I guess, in part in the Bronx, but also for people who commute and use that roadway. That to me is very interesting. Any thoughts on that about iHeart? I mean, frankly, I don't know that I've ever used it. Don't tell.
Well, one borough historian said it's a wave of the future because we're now going away from the history sign, the iconic H, the history channel, the electronic messaging board at the bottom that told you the temperature, that gave you the news, is now being replaced by iHeartRadio, and it's kind of a sign of the times.
So it's a good way to put it. It's almost like a handing off into the future. Well, we're going from a history channel, you get it, into a new type of media and a new type of doing communications. One other story before we take a break, and then we're going to bring Dave Cruz back in, and we're going to do our Buzz of the Week, which we're going to talk about development, and a very interesting story that Dave wrote about, which we're going to use for our foundation for that discussion. You wrote about heroin overdoses in Loretto Park. If we had picked up this story and read it in 1978 or 76, we may have said, oh, well, okay, unfortunately, that's what's going on. It's incredible that now 30 years later, or 40 years later, we're still having that same conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really sad because we have these. Two individuals have been linked to heroin overdose. The third individual who passed away in the park, still investigating the cause of his death. It's very sad, and the precinct has been doing all they can to.
Are people in the neighborhood concerned? I think they would have to be about drug use. I mean, is that a rampant issue, or were these two exceptions?
Well, not just drug use, but drug distribution. And I think that right now there are many groups involved. The Morris Park Community Association, along with the 49th Precinct, are actively trying to search for these individuals who are providing the drugs in these neighborhoods, and they're more than certain that it is coming from in that neighborhood. It's not being
brought from elsewhere.
Right.
It's very easy for people to say, oh, it's not our problem, it's coming from elsewhere.
Right.
I've got to add, and I know you said, well, the 49th Precinct is concerned, and I'm sure they are, but this is what President Obama meant when he said that, we have developed all these problems and we're expecting the police to clean them up for us. By the time we get to a point that drugs are being sold or that people are willingly taking them or becoming addicted to them, that is way after. I mean, yes, the police need to be involved and it's a legal matter, but that is way after we're in a position to solve those problems. The solving of those problems, and this is my statement, is what drives people toward it. Certainly what makes those kinds of drugs available, which is well before what the NYPD and the 49th Precinct can deal with. Those are the issues in our society, I believe, that we need to take a look at. So I'm not even phrasing it as a question, because that is my definitive statement. We always seem to, as you said and everybody says, oh, well, let's let the police clean it up. That's like after the fact. To me, the fact is what's getting us into those situations. Anyway, Stephen Goodstein from the Bronx Times, you're going to take a break. Dave Cruz, who's out there somewhere on Skype, he's going to take a break. I'm going to take a break. And you, my friend, are going to take a break. We're going to be right back with more on the Bronx Buzz, and our Buzz of the Week is going to be a very interesting development project that is being proposed for Mill Pond Park, just south of Yankee Stadium. Don't go away.
Keeps me warm. We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Hello, good people of the Bronx and beyond. Welcome to A Life in Art.
Every Monday night at 9, we talk to the borough's movers and shakers about the latest in Bronx politics, education, healthcare, arts and culture, and literally any and everything that's important to the people of the Bronx. There's a reason why Bronxites have been turning to Bronx Talk for more than 20 years, because Bronx Talk is about you and me, the people of the Bronx. So we'll see you Monday night at 9.
Hamilton was adopted from a
Okay,
rest-
back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and our guests in the studio, Stephen Goodstein from the Bronx Times, and out there in Skype land is David Cruz from the Norwood News. Before we get to the Buzz of the Week, during the break, Stephen was telling me about, just to finish up the dialogue about Loretto Park, the 49th Precinct, based on, not what I said, but on the concept that we need to do more, and it's not just about getting drugs off the street. You were telling me some things that I really want to make sure we get on the show.
Well, the 49th Precinct is really going out of their way, doing way more than they're expected to do just by making the situation better. They're holding a video game tournament in the same park where those overdoses took place, and they also held a bike tournament a few weeks back.
Just trying to do more stuff, which feeds into what my contention was a moment ago. All right, let's bring Dave Cruz back into the conversation. Dave, talk to me about, let's set the stage, about what you wrote about at Mill Pond Park. This is a park, and yet now we're talking about development.
Well, it's a property that's right next to Mill Pond. The city has issued a request for, it's called an RFEI.
Right.
And it's essentially just a precursor to a request for proposal. They're just asking developers to they're picking their brain to see how they would develop barren piece of property at right in Mill Pond Park.
As I understood it, and for the people that I spoke to, that is mapped as parkland. Won't there need to be an alienation bill to alienate that parkland?
That parkland is just adjacent to the barren piece of property.
So your contention is that it's not parkland?
Well, right. If you look at the actual piece of property, it's a barren piece of. It's just a bunch of dirt at this point.
Right.
I mean, they use it for, but right next to that barren piece of property is Mill Pond.
Does this, and now we're going to use this and ask Steve a similar question, does this instill fear into the community because it raises the G word, that somebody's going to put up market rate housing and that will not be for the people of the Bronx, and ultimately people who are a little wealthier will move in, and that will, you got the mall right next door, and all of a sudden you're creating a community that does not include the people who currently live in that neighborhood.
Right. This is considered mixed use. They want to build 3 stories, mixed use, clear what the AMI is. But I did speak to Ed Garcia, and he was essentially explaining that these buildings that they're building right now are not designed for people who live there. Their incomes don't necessarily reflect the AMI that the city would likely go after. I mean, we still don't know what the AMI is.
Right.
This
Mysterious AMI, I mean, of course, it's supposed to be a number that everybody agrees to, but nobody agrees what it is. When I mentioned the G word, Steve Goodstein here in the studio was saying, yes, your concerns, or what do you think?
Well, reading David's article, it reminded me a lot of a story I worked on earlier in the year involving what is being now known as the Piano District, which is the Chetrick group's
right, which is
project.
Just south of that area.
Right, exactly. Now it begs the question, is it gentrification or is it revitalization?
Right. Well, and here's the question I'm going to ask you, and then I'll ask Dave the same question. It comes up again and again and again. Is it possible to develop the Bronx without displacing somebody? In other words, people say, well, wait a minute, we want our neighborhoods to do better. And if so, how is it possible to do this, to bring in more money, to build up the neighborhoods without making some people upset and particularly having them displaced?
Well, it's tough to make everybody happy in the situation. You know, you want to make the area upscale. You want to keep it upscale, but at the same time, that's going to mean that prices are going up in terms of rent. You know, it's a tough line that developers have to straddle when coming up with these projects.
I'm going to add my 2 cents, but I'll give David Cruz a chance to add his in. What are your thoughts? Is it possible to do this without, upsetting the neighborhood and let the people currently live in the Bronx benefit?
Well, I'm going to say with respect to this property, I mean, they're not turning it into luxury housing. They're turning it into mixed-use housing. And this is sort of like in response to Mayor Bill de Blasio's affordable housing New York plan. And it's not looking to displace anyone. Okay. Currently, that property is empty. So why not just build?
Right. So your contention is, in this case, it's not going to be luxury housing, which is different from the Somerset Partners property further south. My contention, which I have said on this show and on Bronx Talk and to anybody in the community who has said anything about this to me, I'd like to make it so that the people in the Bronx who live on lower incomes all of a sudden figure out a way to get them so that they can afford better and so that they will be able to live in better places and build up the neighborhoods. And of course, what's the answer to that? And the answer to that is education and access to higher education. This is the borough of universities, yet we're still looking at areas that are, terribly poor and underserved. And so that's my contention, is that I'm not disagreeing that gentrification is an issue. I'm saying it may be solvable with a larger vision. That's my point. Stephen Goodstein from the Bronx Times, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to invite you again.
Oh, I'm back. Okay. I'm coming back.
David Cruz, we're going to invite you again, but the next time we invite you, we're going to have you be here in the studio. So beware.
Thank
all right?
you.
All right. Folks, that's all. We've been buzzing all night, and we'll be buzzing back here again next Thursday at 6 o'clock. Have a good night.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort...
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go long, son!
It's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.